Okay, so today's dissection is respiratory system, and there's actually very little cutting to have to do. We're mostly identifying respiratory structures. And we're going to start with the lungs. We have a right and a left lung, and they are in the pleural cavities. And each lung has a different number of lobes. The right lung has more lobes than the left lung. The right lung has a superior lobe, a middle lobe, and an inferior lobe. And each lobe is separated by narrow slit-like openings called fissures. And the fissures are named for their orientation. So this fissure goes directly across, and we know that we call that transverse normally, which is in a horizontal position. And so this fissure is called the horizontal fissure between the superior and the middle lobe. The next fissure is called the oblique fissure because it runs at a diagonal along the lung, and that separates the middle lobe from the inferior lobe. Oblique fissure. Now the left lung in the cat has a superior and an inferior lobe as well, but the superior lobe is slightly divided. You can see that there. It's connected at the bottom, so it is all one lobe. So don't let that get confusing. The whole thing is a single lobe. So that is superior and then inferior lobe. And that's what we have as humans, a superior and an inferior lobe. So there are only two lobes in the left lung, and they are separated by a diagonal running narrow slit-like opening or fissure. And so this is called the oblique fissure on the left side. Okay, we're also going to be identifying the trachea and the larynx, which you've actually already done during your previous dissections. So on these cats where the head has been removed, you know that you have your tubes. The anterior tube or ventral tube on the body is going to be your trachea. Behind that was esophagus. We also identified these structures in the sagittal cat head. So, the ventral or anterior portion is the larynx or voice box. It's cartilage, it's harder tissue, and then behind that was esophagus. We're also going to be looking at the sheep pluck. And the sheep pluck is from a sheep, and it includes the tongue all the way down to the bottom of the trachea. Well, about 2/3 maybe. So what we're going to be learning on the sheep pluck is the tongue. Okay. And then when you look at this from the inside, junk in here, let's get that out of there. What that is. Get out of there. Okay. And when you look at this from the inside, this is the epiglottis. And that epiglottis, remember, is elastic cartilage that is going to fold down over the airways as we swallow. Epiglottis. Okay. Now the glottis is the actual opening to the larynx. So this opening where air would go into the larynx is the glottis, which is why this is called epiglottis, because it's over the glottis. Okay. Now, we have two sets of cords. One was called the true vocal folds or vocal cords, and the other is the false. The false are these two mucosal ridges at the top of the larynx, and they have no role in voice production. They just help the epiglottis form a seal. You see that like that as we swallow. So even though they're called vocal folds or vestibular folds, they are false because they don't actually have a role in voice production. These two bumps on the inside of the larynx, here and here, are the true vocal cords. And those are the ones that are connective tissue strands that as air passes up through the voice box, they cause those vocal cords to vibrate, which makes sound waves in the air. Okay? Alright, we're also going to be identifying the hyoid bone. And the hyoid bone, remember, is underneath the mandible. So here's the tongue. The mandible of the animal would be right here. And just underneath that is the hyoid bone. Okay, and it doesn't look like much with the video because it's still covered in a little bit of tissue. But when you have this at your table, you can feel that this is a bone. And you're seeing the one side of the horseshoe-shaped bone, hyoid. You're also going to identify the thyroid cartilage, okay, and the cricoid. Now, the cricoid, you can see, is very thin in cross-section in the front. But as you go to the back, the cross-section is, this is actually cut right there, very long. So this is the ring of cartilage that gets larger as you go posteriorly, cricoid. Okay. The rest of these cartilage, that first one is cricoid, right there. The rest of these cartilage cross-sections are the tracheal rings, or tracheal cartilages that are along the trachea tube. Here's the trachea from the outside. Okay. So tongue, epiglottis, glottis. These are the false chords, true chords, thyroid cartilage, cricoid cartilage, trachea, and tracheal rings in cross-section.